So you've done your research, you have lists of hundreds of observations, pain points, opportunities, and other information points. So what do you do now? If you're like me, you'd be sharpening a Sharpie, breaking open a pack of post-it notes, unwrapping those voting dots, and clearing some wall space. But what do you do when you can't do that? I've come across this exact problem throughout lockdown. Like Kat, we're on the same project. We have done a lot of remote workshops recently. Specifically, I wanted to give you an example of a discovery-style project that I kicked off in January. It's now entirely remote, and I was very fortunate to have actually met my team and built rapport with them in person before we got locked down. But when lockdown did start, I was suddenly confronted with the idea of synthesizing a list of 250 pain points and opportunities on my own at my kitchen table, which, by the way, is not very big. Not one to be easily defeated, and despite having vehemently opposed the possibility of remote workshops in the past, I started doing my research, asking around the business and finding out how to make it work. Safe to say, over the last 6 or 7 weeks, I have learned a few very important things. But honestly, the thing I've learned most is that remote workshops do work. If you prepare in advance and you set them up carefully, you really can get a lot out of them. I'd actually say, and there are a few people who can't believe that I'm going to say this, but I would say that I can now prepare, run, and write up remote workshops almost as effectively, if not more effectively, than the real workshops. I can do them more efficiently, the write-up is quicker, and also it's kind of nice to be able to structure the different things in different ways. You're not limited anymore by just paper. You have so many formats that you can use, and the way you can move things around and copy them, it's brilliant. And you can do all of that without straying more than about 10 meters from your coffee machine, which is a great benefit. So preparation is key. I'm the kind of person that loves to have a workshop room beautifully set up. I like to consider the experience of my participants from the moment they arrive in the meeting room. Everything is carefully prepared, ordered, color-coded, and neat. I'm sure there's a few of you like me out there. What I've learned is that is particularly important when you have online workshops. Any small issues, confusions, or distractions take so much longer to sort out than if you're in person. What I hadn't factored into my plans was how long that preparation takes. The first time I did a remote workshop, I ended up working till midnight trying to prep the workshop carefully, just because I knew it was so important. And I was starting to worry how on earth I was then going to get everything else done. But what I hadn't considered was that the preparation's worth it, because the write-up is basically done for you. How many times have you come out of a remote workshop with illegible handwriting and hundreds of post-it notes that you can't really remember what they were related to? You don't have to worry about any of that because it's all written up. So it's worth it. Set the expectations with your participants really early on, because they're probably as nervous and as skeptical as you. So run them through the setup, make sure they understand it, and make sure you're really carefully prepared. Next, use familiar formats. As I mentioned, they're probably nervous and skeptical too. So ask yourself how comfortable people are going to be using the tool you've selected. If you're using an unfamiliar format, give participants time to familiarise themselves with the software controls and methods you're using, and don't underestimate the time required. I literally spent 10 minutes the other day giving people a control copy, control paste tutorial because they were software developers and they very rarely used the types of commands that we were working with. They weren't good at panning, they weren't good at post-it placement. We spent 10 minutes practicing. Luckily, I'd planned that into the session. Also, don't forget about paper. Paper is still available to you and it can still be really useful. We had a great workshop the other day run by Kat where we did some ideation on paper. Then everybody just took a photo and uploaded it to our shared space so that we could review and comment. It worked really well. And if you give them a good way to upload the photos, it's a very powerful tool. I'd like to give you one example of where I had to completely tear apart a remote workshop and use a slightly unusual tool to make it work. The developers that I mentioned, the IT support guys, I put together a whole workshop for them in Miro, and they just really couldn't cope. Now I looked at the formats that they're familiar with, which is code. I can't code, so that wasn't going to work. I had a brainwave. The tool that they use, that I also use, is Jira. I actually ran an entire workshop in Jira using tickets with tagging and comments, and I set up the board so they could move the tickets around to make the workshop work, and we got a really good outcome from it. So again, prepare and think outside the box. Now you've prepared your workshop space, you're using a format that your users understand, you let them practice with it, and you're getting to the bit of the workshop where you want to have a discussion group. I attended a workshop once, and I don't know why I didn't think of it before, but they split us out into pairs. Breakout groups of 3 or more just don't work well remotely. When there's more than 2 people on a remote call, you can't talk at the same time. You end up talking over each other, someone will just be silent. When you have 2 people, you're either the presenter or the listener. Everybody's engaged, everybody's an active participant. So if you're going to have breakout groups in a remote workshop, which I recommend you do, if you're going to do it, have 2 people per group. And finally, going back to one of Kat's points, have time to think and move. Don't be afraid of leaving silence. I cannot tell you how many hours I have spent on remote workshops, absolutely desperate for a break, but too nervous for some reason to walk out. In a physical workshop, you would probably just say you need a break, but for some reason on a remote workshop, people don't feel like they can interrupt to say they need a break. So be more cognizant, be more aware of it. Some people just cannot do a 3-hour workshop at home without interruptions. So don't exclude those people by creating one that requires 3 hours of concentration. One thing I like to do is give people 15 minutes to complete a 10-minute task and then encourage them to take the break at their convenience. In that time, I've actually had people who've gone for a 10-minute walk to think about everything they want to say and then come back and quickly documented it for the group before we came back together. It wasn't perfect, but it worked for them and we got some brilliant insights and they got a nice 10-minute walk. So when you're running co-creation workshops remotely, prepare. Structure your space and save yourself time later. Try and use formats that are familiar for attendees and think outside the box. Ditch those breakout groups and use pairs, and do not forget the thinking and moving time.